It's a privilege and an honor to introduce to you today our guest. Krzysztof Wodiczko shouldn't need any further introduction, but I will do so anyways. He's an artist, he's a designer, he's a researcher, and he's a teacher. He focuses his attention on the ways in which architecture and monuments, the city and its citizens, the public space at large, reflect collective memory and history. Through his work, he gives voice to the silenced, the invisibilized, the marginalized individuals and communities that live, that survive in the shadows of society. He's renowned for his large-scale slide and video projections on architectural facades and monuments. He has realized in his career more than 80 such public projections in Australia, Austria, Canada, England, Germany, Holland, Ireland, Israel, Italy, Mexico, Poland, Spain, Switzerland, and in the United States. Since the late 80s, his projections have involved the active participation of marginalized and estranged city residents, or as he himself has said in these days visiting Chile, with the people that are themselves monuments to their history and their own life. Simultaneously, he has been designing and implementing a series of nomadic instruments and vehicles with homeless, immigrants, and war veteran operators for their survival and communication. Krzysztof Wodiczko is professor in resident of art, design, and the public domain at the GSD, Harvard University, and formerly directed the interrogative design group at MIT for almost 20 years. In 1998, Krzysztof received the International Hiroshima Prize for his contribution as an artist to world peace. He also was awarded the Georgi Kepes Award at MIT, the College of Art Association Artist Award for a distinguished body of work, the Katarzyna Kobro Award for of the Polish Cultural Institute, the Skowhegan Medal for Sculpture, and he also was awarded by the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs the medal for his contribution to the promotion of Polish culture and the Golden Medal, Gloria Artis, from the Polish Ministry of Culture for his exceptional contribution to Polish culture. The work of Wodiczko has been subject of numerous publications, including critical vehicles, writings, projects, and interviews. Krzysztof Wodiczko Guest in 2009, and The City of Refuge, which deals about the 9/11 memorial in the United States. It is quite an honor to have you here, Krzysztof. And now you here leading this workshop. We're hoping that you're going to help us have some time to reflect on the challenges that we face in contemporary Chilean society. Krzysztof.
Thank you for such a generous introduction. And I would like to thank all of you for finding time to be here. And I also like to thank you all on behalf of our little team here. That is Eva Harabash and Orkan Telhan and myself for an opportunity to work with students here. In fact, this workshop has something to do with the new body of work that I'm planning to develop, and actually it starts right from here, because the type of equipment that and the use of projection technique that we are exploring here will be, this particular method will be actually tested for the first time. So I will present here some projects that I've done before. Of course, not all of the projects, because it will be no time for this. I will only focus on those projects which seem to be related to the workshop. So what you see here is a photograph taken from one of the magazines that were dealing with immigration issues in the 80s. What you see here is there are three people. There is one person on the left, obviously very different than two people on the right. Those two people on the right seem to be nervous about this person on the left. He is trying to avoid their gaze. He is in fact being deported by their gaze. He looks outside of the frame of our vision, because the photograph is a little bit of the perspective that we have. So why is it that there is this strange gap, wall, invisible wall between him and them? Well, why is it that they are afraid of him? Because they want him out of the picture. Or they are afraid of him because he resembles or reminds, brings to the surface, brings to life something that ought to be hidden, their own strangeness. They are the ones who are alienated from him, more than he from them. So the very presence of this that is suppressed over years of one's upbringing, meaning development of identity of us versus them, we and the others, build on the difference between those outside of a frame of the border and those who are inside. That identity is developing over time and suppressing the original strangeness, that we feel about ourselves. Each time we pass exam, we feel more and more stranger to ourselves. The very fact we're born, each year we are developing certain level of alienation from ourselves. Now, the idea of us, that who are not them, consolidates our identity in a kind of, in a reference to those others. So let's get rid of this otherness and the other. Now, this person on the left, however, has lots of things to say about not only them, but the whole society at large, the whole world, perhaps. What's wrong in his life, it is a symptom of something that is wrong with the entire world. Democracy, for example, could be measured by the level in which society can accept strangers to themselves. Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed because citizens of those cities were mistreating strangers. So clearly he knows there is something wrong for him, for his children, for everybody, because the way he's being mistreated. Well, but he cannot speak. How can he speak? It's impossible. He doesn't have any confidence that even speaking would make any difference. Plus, he will have to start speaking even if no one wants to hear. So I have to come out with unsolicited act of speech in public space. Because the public space is there for people to recognize each other and to allow strangers to come in. And also it's a place to spread and expand the issue of rights. The inclusiveness is the process. Well, he cannot speak. He also might not be able to speak because of the very experiences he went through in his life, crossing various borders and dealing with immigration, dealing with the situation in that old country, situation with new country. It makes it impossible for him to speak because he's traumatized by those experiences. So he starts speaking and his throat is closed. Therefore, we need to design something between him and them. A thing that will allow him to open up and initiate the act of speech, to see the world from his point of view and project to the public, through the public space to everybody, and also allow those people on the right to come closer and listen without fear. So it's a kind of container opener for him, and the kind of artifice that is bizarre and strange enough, so they will come to the artifice first, and then through that object come closer to him. Difficult. I don't think I managed to really respond to such such a weight of responsibility and task. So I try to get a little closer to this, the type of object, the type of project, the type of performative action, type of media intervention, the type of event that will make possible those two on the right and the one on the left to come closer, to decrease the distance, to increase proximity. So, what I've done is actually, so I try to design those equipments, those things in between, a series of walking sticks. Something that corresponds to the cliche of wanderer, maybe a little bit of a prophet. Somebody who is crossing the boundary but is carrying the walking stick seems to be something more familiar. It's those who are using those sticks, the wanderers, very often their carve history of their displacement on the road. In this case, I started with a very abstract kind of code, log of displacement. Then, like for example, one form refers to deportation, another with being in a retention center or crossing one or two borders. Then I realized that it would be better to replace this part of the stick with the containers in which the immigrants can place very precious icons, actually relics of their displacement, such as various ID cards or correspondence with immigration or any objects that seem to be important for them symbolically. And at the top of the stick to actually place, that was a long time ago, so equipment was much different than today, monitor and speaker, so they could infuse this walking stick with stories, record in advance all sorts of moments and events of displacement, and also points of view and critical vision of society to come, the better world to come, and also explain many different things. It's impossible to explain to people because it's usually too late. Too late. There's always too late. It's so hard to speak. For example, people ask, where are you from? That's a very generous question. You know, it means someone's interested. But for immigrant, it's an insult. Why is it an insult? Because for immigrant is, why are you asking this question, immigrant would say. Why don't you ask another question? What I'm doing here? Why do I have to operate in your mind as a work of geography? I am in fact a work of work. I do work more than anybody else. I even send money back to countries from which I came. I contribute to your culture, economy. I am your culture, by the way. I am in fact your symptom. You know, because your fear of myself, it's your problem. So I'm an evidence of many problems. Why are you asking me this way? Oh, maybe you're asking me this way because you're playing the game with yourself. You say, well, maybe I'm supposed to answer to your question to prove that you are right by recognizing from the country from which I came by my accent. Huh? So, all right, you won. No, you didn't win. So why should I play that role? But in any case, where are you from? It's also a bad question, because why don't you ask me where are you from? Because I'm of many places. Before I came here, I already went through many. I was already a stranger in my own country, so it's impossible. Well, of course, there's another question that often they are being asked. If those people actually come in couples or groups, the question is, the two of you, where are you from? So the answer is, well, I speak 8 languages, he speaks 6. We have 2 languages in common. We're from countries that are from 2 completely distant parts of the world. So why do you say that we might be from the same place? Because of the color of our skin, I guess. Well, where are you from, by the way? They could ask. So all of those questioning the questions can be pre-recorded in those instruments. Also, whatever these instruments are saying, they are kind of relieving the owner, the operator, the performer, from saying all of those things over and over again. Therefore, he or she can say other things. And say, okay, don't listen to this. Actually, other things I wanted to say. By the way, it's not true anyway, because now I think of other aspects of my experience. And in fact, the one who believes the story is a fool, as one of the rabbinical scholars said in Talmud. The one who denies the story is a wicked non-believer, because the truth of the story is not necessarily in those facts. The truth of the story is an emotional charge of speech and emotional charge of the listener. And also the very reason I'm telling the story. That's the truth. Well, there will be another story and another story. So those who are outside of history and treated as people with no history, they must be telling stories. The storytelling, in fact, is a work of memory. Memory, in fact, is an act of telling the story. Memory is a practice. Memory is an action. Memory is a change. Memory is a protest. There is a relation between, as I mentioned yesterday, between testimony and protest. They both have testes in them. Witness. I witness to what's wrong in order to propose the better world. So the immigrant or stranger's utopia is very simple. It's not utopia meaning better, like no place, utopia, utopos, no place, or good place, so-called good place. No. For immigrant, utopia is no place. It's no exclamation mark place. It's a place I refuse to accept for myself, for my children, for all of you. The place in which I am now, right now. And doing so, I hope that in the future there will be no place for this place, for myself, my children, and all of you. So this is immigrant utopia. In order to make this clear, extraordinary tricks, methods, techniques must be employed. That's why design for or designing with people like this, even better to say rather than for them. It's an art of design by necessity because they are instruments, it's equipment. But also those equipments and those instruments, they must create conditions for people with whom you develop those designs so they can become artists themselves. Artists who speak for themselves, who speak for the entire society, the artists who are speaking in order to change the world and taking advantage of public space. Well, the public space, it's something that in the 70s was defined like the space which is always indeterminate, has the virtue of belonging to no one, of being large enough to accommodate only those who recognize one another within it and who give it a meaning, and also of allowing the question of a right to spread. That's what I mentioned earlier. So those precious things, of course, can be dictionaries, relics, but also the instruments can be designed in other ways than in the case of early versions. For example, it could be just a responsive instrument that the stories are being brought back by performative action on the part of the user performer, using, for example, electric sensing technology, which in the many years ago was further improved by MIT Media and Physics group, but in fact originated with theremin, with these ingenious Soviet scientists, before even computers existed. Or we could think of the equipment that turns the operator, user, performer into the cyborg. Because there is a relationship between immigrants and strangers and cyborgs. Because they are the ones who are between the lost land and promised land, between being natural and artificial, between being a kind of uncanny, being an uncanny situation. So they are kind of denaturalizing themselves in a way in order to become non-strangers. They are in a process, constant process of becoming also strangers to themselves. Now, this kind of equipment can also be used to improve immigrant speech and accent. But in any case, all of this is very Baroque because, as Julia Kristeva told us, immigrants have a Baroque personality. They use gestures, accents, special, extraordinary techniques to convey things beyond the standard language. So any media equipment seems to be proper supplement for the immigrants. In fact, when we speak about those walking sticks like this, one could see the reference to prophet. In a way, since they are denouncing and announcing the world, they are on the move. They are, I would say, functional prophets, meaning they are not prophets consciously, but they act as if they were prophets. Or in our own mind, they should be recognized as prophetic figures. They announce new world. In fact, prophet needs prostheses. Prophet needs prosthetics. Moses received such prosthetics. He received first when, as we are told, God commanded him to spread the truth of existence of God and of things that God would like to tell people. He refused. He said, I cannot do this job because I have speech problems. I cannot speak. So God got very upset because at that time God was really getting angry. He said, you don't do this to me. First of all, you don't say no to God, so you cuckoo. But secondly, I gave you this stick, this, so you can make miracles. And you make miracles. People will believe what you say. But also you have a brother whose name is Aaron. Well, you tell your brother what I told you, and he will tell it to people because he's a very good speaker. So in fact, Aaron became mouthpiece of Moses, porte-parole, as French would say, or spokesperson in a diplomatic language. So that's why actually this equipment is called porte-parole, the mouthpiece. So it's important to see this in action. As you can see, those containers also can contain objects that are very symbolic importance. The most important thing that we have in our life is time. Well, immigrants wait and wait and wait for the papers to be processed and cleared in many countries. The most precious thing in their life is stolen from them. It's frozen. They cannot develop. So they are in this kind of retention centers, or they are on hold. So he is, of course, referring to this here. So you see here the people ask questions, what's there? Why you put it there? Sometimes the answer is, it's none of your business. I need it. But sometimes there is a long explanation. So you can see here the Baroque option. You can improve the speech of the person. You can improve it. You can create new kind of speech. Of course, the equipment that we are trying to design in this workshop, not necessary for immigrants, and not necessarily using this kind of display units or video monitors. In fact, something else is going to happen, but the methodology here may be still worth considering as valid. Meaning, the equipment is not only for this moment of act of appearance, presence in public space, but for a longer process of developing capacity to speak and finding words and expression for one's experiences. Therefore, it has a developmental psychological aspect. So here, the maybe even dramatic therapy component is connected with politics. Psychology here is connected with politics and with media and with aesthetics. So the performative and media art with design and with psychotherapy and also with understanding of politics of public space. Because in public space, there's something important happening here, visibility. Well, Hannah Arendt said that visibility and equality are connected. Therefore, invisibility and inequality, unfortunately, also go hand in hand. So being present for who I am, not who would like me to be, it's a very important intervention, act of disruption of perception, misperception, and routine kind of way of seeing things, including those others, whoever they may be. So this is important interventional aspects, but also psychological aspects, which I wanted to stress. Also, the person hearing her or seeing something present, like recognizing oneself being in space, is a kind of strange feedback. All of those things that were interiorized now exteriorized, and they come back through other channels, through eyes and ears, what was somewhere in one's head. So sometimes those people write things, and then they speak and perform, and they are shocked to actually receive it back, and they reintegrate this, and then they become a different people. Because the part of the brain that governs writing is different than the one that governs speech, and so forth. So those are, I'm elaborating this longer, this type of work, because the method of developmental aspects and performative aspect of the work in public space developed through those instruments became valid for my other projects, for projections of the new kind of projections on buildings, animation of symbolic structures with people who are marginalized or relegated to the world outside of our cone of vision. So that was very educational for me to actually work on this type of projects. Going this again here.
What is it for?
Title. So other equipments can be designed for dialogical speech and so forth. But also the one that I designed for young people in Japan. By the way, I have to bring a little context here. I received Hiroshima Prize for what the prize description says for the contribution to the world peace as an artist. Well, of course, I didn't deserve this prize. I don't know if there are not that many people who deserve, but certainly I didn't, I thought. But since I accepted the prize, well, I have to keep working to deserve the prize. So there are many projects that I developed after this Hiroshima Prize, and that's immediately after that. That's the project. Because I just realized that the situation of young people in Japan is very difficult, especially senior high school students who are about to jump into this world of adults, meaning university and so forth, in which there is no room for human development much. Do you either pass exam or not? You are in or out. It's a very tough system, not education, but also work. So it's a kind of place, a moment in life, the high school, where people think, what's going on? What's wrong here? They have problems with families, they have domestic violence, abuse, and they have to deal with domestic situation, the school situation, they're being bullied, they are being rejected for the smallest difference that they can even show, or it's even apparently highly visible, that difference, but they're being immediately rejected to the camp of strangers and those who shouldn't live. It's very difficult. So in this situation, I don't mean for everybody in Japan, but looks like for a large number of people, it's a hellish thing to be in this high school, and some of those people are called school refusers. In Japan, they sometimes go to school and refuse the school, which is different than school dropouts. So if there is any change, radical change to happen in Japan, my private opinion, after experiencing the situation, the change will happen from high school, not from university students. Because when they are in university, it's too late. They're already trapped, fixed And many of them are not there because they're outside of society, because they didn't pass exams. So the issue is how to imagine those people to tell the truth. Telling the truth is something we elaborated yesterday in a workshop in relation to the very ancient, almost like essential right in democratic society called paresia or paresia, meaning the right of free speaking, without which Athenian democracy will not exist. In fact, people who were banished or who were forced to leave Athens as an act of punishment, they were fearful, most fearful, being rejected because they would lose paresia. There was like the only place in the world where there was such paresia at that time. No, certainly not in Sparta, you know. So the issue is then this paresia was brought yesterday because of Michel Foucault lectures in Berkeley during the time of free speech movement, in fact, when he brought back this paresia reference, but he didn't really tell us how to make sense of it in contemporary society. So as I mentioned earlier, this paresiastes, the paresiast, the someone who is this free speaker, was a very special person to be selected of many people to really be in a position to disrupt the life, to tell the truth, risking own position, sometimes even life and reputation, to be a frank, direct speaker who speaks from own stomach, heart, and mind, what's wrong, what should be changed. This, without such person, democratic system, according to Athenians, could not exist. So debate who should be that speaker, who is qualified, was part of discourse, democratic discourse as well. So in a present modern democracies, we have written on paper in constitutions that just about everybody should have the right to rights. Unlike in Athens, where slaves, women, and strangers, foreigners, in many cases, could not enjoy those rights. A small number of people, polities, had those rights. So now everybody's supposed to have rights. But in order to have those rights, you have to assert your access to those rights. It's not given like this. So, in fact, you have to work on this. Well, then, without the equipment, as I mentioned before, you cannot do it. So then, at that time, you could just speak in Agora. Now you have to have at least microphone and megaphone, or large loudspeaker and microphone. That's minimum. But of course, as I mentioned before, microphone is not enough if you cannot speak for other reasons. So the equipment that I design, we designed, interrogative design group at MIT, was very simple. In a way, it was like to speak through your own back. Because those who carried shame, they might prefer to speak through their back, especially in the culture when face-to-face communication is not welcome, like in Japan. The young people, also speaking to young people doesn't exist. No one speaks to young people, or they don't speak to adults. They may speak to each other. So that's how it is in a society that has still a long ways to go to embrace this public space and rights. So this equipment has many variations, and here I'm showing various sketches because, in fact, members of the workshop were asked to prepare some sketches for this afternoon. So, of course, those are sketches made partially by hand and partially by computers. It's a mixture of two, which I advise people to use both, and also reference images implanted from what is circulating on internet and in media. But anyway, what you see here, there are various approaches to this. Cameras looking at your eyes, monitors in the back, speaker in the back, microphone in front, and rear view mirror. So you can see the interlocutor in the back, or additional camera and additional monitor. Mirror seemed to be something that was discovered yesterday when we were playing with those mini projectors in public space here in the city. But what is also interesting here is that those two antennas to also allow for two people to work together, one carrying the eyes and voice of the other interchangeably. So we could have this kind of connection, which also was discussed yesterday, a possibility of transmission or dialogical appearance of two or more performers who can engage the public in something that could be called provocative dialogue. The provocative dialogue is a technique that was developed by a special branch of parrhesiastes, those free speakers in Athens, in a little later time with overlaps with Christian era. They provoke the public to discuss the matters of great importance of which no one wanted to speak. So they engage. Provocative dialogue was one of those tricks. In some ways, they were competing in this technique with early Christians as well in early Christian era of antiquity. So here there is the two versions of this equipment. One has a computer, another doesn't. But in other words, you can record as in those walking sticks, all of the things that no one wants to hear, but must be told and said in public space. And then fire it. You can have various switches there. You don't see them, so you can have various programs to fire through your back, as if you're as a kind of a jet moving ahead by firing the truth through your back, but seeing what's happening in the rear view mirror. Well, this is a little bit like the Angel of History. I don't know if you remember this painting by Paul Klee. You see this angel. It's a tiny painting. It's in Israel Museum in some department of drawings, or strangely hidden, but it's important. Small painting. It shows the angel that is, according to Walter Benjamin, who looked at this painting and wrote his essay called Angel of History, is flying back, looking frightened by the explosion and disaster of modernity, as Benjamin thought, was flying back, blown by this kind of history of modernity, of modernism. Modernity was attached to history of catastrophes, according to Benjamin. Well, putting Benjamin aside, his theory of history or philosophy of history, one has to see that maybe this angel of history has something missing. At this rear view mirror. So being blown and flying, it's better to know where actually are you going. It was interesting. So that's why this kind of rear view mirror. I will see if I can show you a little bit of that. Okay. So he had this person coming to the classroom who was rejected by classmates because he supposedly have a different texture of his skin. I couldn't see that texture, but they are very precise in detecting the difference. So he went to this classroom with this equipment. So it's important to see that this kind of, the laughter, as Benjamin also said when he wrote about Brecht, the laughter is important. He said that vibration of diaphragm, when you laugh, provides better conditions for the beginning of thinking than the vibration of the soul. So this is about disrupting and being suddenly estranged of your own kind of situation and seeing the world in different perspective. So those equipments have virtue of being bizarre, strange. So in a way they are kind of alienating alienation, you know, because they, and you see things, like from helicopter ride, you see yourself, a strange thing. So you start listening, even to yourself, or to others, in a new way. Of course, in a public space, no one immediately is approaching this person, but she's getting a little nervous. There is seemingly nothing happening here. It's always like this. So what I'm saying, don't be discouraged when you design your equipment. There's no immediate engagement. It has sudden structure when it. So this is important. I want to show you one particular case of a young woman, also senior high school student, who's in a difficult situation because her father left the family, left her and the mother alone, disappeared, no word, didn't leave a word or a penny, so he's being blamed for everything, by mother especially. It's all his fault. So of course she lost family, she lost a father, she lost the confidence in father, she lost many things. So she's in a it's not unusual situation though in Japan because perhaps he committed suicide, which is unfortunately more often the case when someone loses a job, or some children commit suicide as well. So maybe she is suicidal herself. So here's what she's seeing is from the skyscraper in Hiroshima. This is a window from the cafeteria where lots of men and women, but mostly men, are eating lunch. Very similar man, she told me, as her father. So she's reluctant to go, but she insisted that she wants to go, and then she was very reluctant. So it's a complicated process. But she still goes into this cafeteria. We're filming from distance, so in fact, not to disrupt the situation. See what happens. So, yeah, it's easy to say. It's naive. Of course, it's naive. But this kind of situation would not happen without this equipment. So, at least there is something. There is a beginning of something. Well, I've asked her why was she crying. Of course, it's hard. It was too hard for her to explain. But I think it's just that one element was there, positive. So perhaps her father was a human being. You know, the way those people, naive way, were human beings. So maybe it's not so bad. Maybe actually it's worth moving ahead with life. But that means there is a psychotherapeutic aspect of this work. right there, which was recognized by my colleagues from art therapy department at NYU. And I was also teaching a little bit last year in graduate program, just to learn from them what I might be doing right or wrong. Because my work, of course, this kind of overlaps with their field. They also try to figure out how to see art and performative art, and media art in public space as something that contributes to therapy. Because public space, in fact, could be a therapeutic environment, not only isolated clinical kind of space without windows. No, it's actually both political and clinical. But not the way Deleuze and Guattari meant clinical, because it's not about symptomatology, as they would like. It's actually about field work. It's about healing people through operating in public space. So there's somebody whose name was Pierre Janet, a psychoanalyst, psychotherapist as well, but psychoanalyst, who said that visibility and public testimony are closely linked to recovery from traumatic experience. Judith Herman, another psychotherapist, psychoanalyst, said the struggle for recovery from trauma, defining a narrative voice through testimony, has a greater chance of success when performed as a public speech act, even more so when directed as the social utterance to and on behalf of others. So when one becomes an agent, that's the very important, maybe the final stage of attempt to recover from trauma, when you speak on behalf of others in public space. So here the paresia is connected with art therapy. Not many people really put it together in one theoretical, psycho-political kind of concept. But in fact, word paresia is used in psychotherapy, to my surprise. So those who testify the truth, especially victims or survivors of trauma or torture, in fact, like the situation we saw yesterday in a museum in the memorial, the memory, the trauma is when people are forced to speak by torture. That's definitely not paresia. But when they are brave enough to speak about torture in public space against authority, that's paresia. So it's a revenge for people who are tortured. So this is, it's important, of course, part of the connection. You have to keep this in mind that trauma is not only political, related to political torture, but also to domestic abuse and to other situations. So this also brings a possibility, this type of work, I realized, to connect with my earlier projects, because I didn't have time to show my projections, a large number of them in many different cities, parts of the world. I developed before this type of work, but there were slide projections. So I was here speaking on behalf of others. I tried to animate those structures, to actualize them, bring them closer to life, to speak of contemporary issues. Fine. But then I realized that I could, of course, use video equipment that was advancing at the same time, to the point that I could, with the same people, could actually speak through monuments and be much larger than they are and make us feeling much smaller than we are in relation to them. So you could look at them like this, like children or students who have to learn something from them. Feel the truth coming to our mind through our neck and through our bones, through our bodily kind of relation to architecture. And they themselves becoming facades and buildings and monuments and taking over this prestigious historic structures, they could then become new monuments, public monuments themselves. Why? Because those people, the ones I refer to, strangers, people who are invisible, unheard of, they are in fact monuments to their own trauma, to their own experience. And they are monuments, themselves speaking the truth and being a witness to many events. So why not turning them into speaking monuments? That is so they can dress themselves in the form and scale and prestige of those structures. So it would be difficult for people who have already very important relation to the